Are you looking to add some visual effects to your online presentation and you want to make a custom graphic like a title or maybe some speaking points or even an animation? Well, if you use PowerPoint, then you already have a tool at your disposal. Today, we are going to talk about how you can make your own graphics using PowerPoint, which is a tool many of us are familiar with. Now, if you've heard me talk about this before, you'll know that I like to create mine in Keynote, which is only for Mac users, because there are some extra levels of animation with transparent backgrounds that are available with Keynote. However, many people either don't have Keynote or they are more familiar with PowerPoint. So in today's video, I am going to show you how you can make these visuals and add them to your presentation using PowerPoint. Now, if we have never met before, my name is Kat, and I help you create professional and engaging online presentations. And I really feel that adding things like titles or visual effects really do elevate the quality of your presentations. So now let's get to it. We're going to hop into PowerPoint, and I'm going to show you how I make some simple and a little bit more advanced graphics. So now we've got our PowerPoint open. And we want to just make sure that we have a clean slate. So I like to go to Layout, and in Layout, just choose Blank. So now we have a completely clean slide. And then we want to add a shape. So let's add just a rectangle. We are going to start off simple by making a title. And perhaps I just want to say my name. Now, the easiest thing you can do is just add a text box, plop it in here. It'll go right in the middle of your shape. And I'm going to add my name, and let's highlight my full name and just bump that up. So you can go over to your text and let's pick 54. It's a nice big size. It should be really clear for people to see, especially if you're bringing this into something like Zoom. And you can always change your font. So I really like Montserrat. And then you could add an extra element like a line. So for example, sometimes I have added lines to the top and bottom. Now it starts as blue. So we are going to drag this line, which is currently invisible. But then if we open our format pane, we can format the shape. And I want this line to be white. I want this width to be a lot thicker. You can also make sure it's straight. Sometimes it's not straight, and you want to make sure that that's correct. And then I want a second one. So I like to copy and then paste when it works. And for some reason, it just got way thinner. So we're just going to roll with it. I now have two thin lines on here. So now you have an example of a really simple title. It only took me a moment to make, so you can quickly go in and create these. However, this is where it's a little different. We are not saving or exporting this slide. We are just going to save all of the elements on the slide. So I like to select all, which on a Mac is Command A. For PC, I can't remember off the top of my head, Control A, I think. And so now everything is highlighted. So I've got my shapes and my text, they're all highlighted. And then I right click and say Save as Picture. And by doing this, I'm just saving the elements on the slide, not the whole slide. So let's name this Name Lower Third, because this is going to be at the lower third or the bottom of my screen. And now I've got that saved. So if we go back to my main camera, which I am using Ecamm, and I drag this picture into the frame, you can see, and I'll just adjust it, that I can bring this forward and then I can stretch it across. Now there is a little gap at the bottom, and that's the way it downloads. So when you save as a picture, it seems to add a little bit of a space. So even if I went all the way down to the bottom of the slide, there's still going to be a little bit of a space. But you can see how easily I created a title and I threw it into my streaming software, in this case Ecamm, but you can also use with OBS, vMix, and other softwares. So now I've got a name, and you saw how simple that was to do. So let's say you want to share your screen using your streaming software, but you'd like to have a cutout for your screen share and then a cutout for you where you want those holes to be transparent. Let's create one of those. We'll start with a shape. We'll pick a rectangle. We'll go up to the corner, drag it across until it fits snugly in here. And now we want to cut it out. So let's pick the shape we would like to cut out. And what I enjoy doing to keep the aspect ratio is I will pick a shape and then start drawing it in the corner and bring it over so that it's actually the same aspect as this wide 16 by 9. And then I usually like to adjust the corners a little bit so it's not so rounded. And then we grab that corner, you hold down Shift, and when you drag it, it will keep all of the aspect ratio intact. So let's now drag this up, and we are going to cut this hole out of the shape. It's a little different than Keynote. You are going to have this one selected. You are now going to select the other one. So now both are selected. And then over here, you'll see Merge Shapes. And you want to choose the Combine. When you do that, you have now cut a hole out. And if we take this shape and kind of drag it around, you can actually see that it is in fact transparent. So let's put that back on the slide. So now we've cut out our screen share hole, but we want one for us. So now we take a shape and we do the same thing, sort of draw that shape the way that you want to show up. Maybe you have two people that are going to show up. You could have two windows, or if it's just you, we want to approximate. You can always play with those corners. And then we do the same thing. We select the background as well, and then we say Combine. And now we have cut out two holes from our shape. Now with PowerPoint, it actually, if we open this format pane, you will see that for the line, if you do have a line around it, even if you cut out a shape, it will actually draw lines around the two holes that you've just cut out. So if you start to make this a little bit wider, you'll see those a little bit thicker. So now we actually have kind of custom created a border around the frame. And so you could do that. You could also change the shape, maybe, or the color. Maybe you want that to be white. Whatever you decide, you can choose the different colors or options you want for those borders. You can also get a little bit fun with your fill. So maybe you want to make a gradient fill. So that has a little bit more of a visual effect. You can change that from linear, maybe to radial. You can play around with how it looks. You can have the direction from the middle or from an angle. You can play around with these different shapes. You can even get rid of having that many. And so this is just a fun way to play around with your slides. So that is something that you can do if you want to create some visual effects. Maybe you do this, but then you don't want a line. You can easily do that as well. So that's how you play around with the format. Make it your own, add your own custom colors if you'd like. You can also add your logo maybe underneath you. That's another option. But this is how you create this. Now, you are going to want to export it the same way, where you select the shape, and there's only one shape on here right now, and you say Save as Picture. And then we want to name this. So I usually call this Picture-in-Picture Screen Share. So I know there's a window for me and for my screen share. Then we click Save, and let's pop this into our preview window. So now I want to adjust the shape to fit, and I would obviously change me from a circle. I would put myself up here, and then I adjust my screen share so that I am just sharing in the window that I want to. So if I wanted to do this demonstration, and let's just add a camera overlay, and I'm going to, this probably looks a little funny right now. We're going to move that over. I'm going to adjust that shape, and then we will put the screen share on top. And here I have it almost put together layout where I have my own picture. I am showing you how to do this demonstration. This is a little bit meta. I can also show you how to get ready for the next one. We are going to delete this slide. We're going to insert a new blank slide to get ready for our next design. So now let's create a sidebar. And that would be the type of thing that you might put beside you so you could have speaking points. I've shown this in a couple of other examples, and we just want to create this shape and pick how wide you want it to be. And in this case, I'll just leave it as the blue. Now, for a sidebar, what I found in PowerPoint is that I prefer to add the text in the middle of the page and then drag it over because I don't want it to be centered right in the middle of the sidebar. I'd like to have a little bit more control. So the example I've given before is to have an agenda, and maybe I want this to be, let's say 48, and I'm going to move this over here. Personally, I like to have this be white text when it's on that darker background. You can do whatever you like. And then let's add some more text. So text box, and here, just really simple introductions, new initiatives, budget update, new business. So you're hosting a meeting and you've got all your staff and you want to have this agenda. So now you can bump this up. So maybe this is a little bit smaller at 44. That's really big. Let's go down a little. Let's try 40 and we will move this over. 40 is too big. It's quite big. So let's go down and do, say, 36. Now we have it. You can adjust it. Maybe you actually want these to be centered in case you just do that. So you can just use this like you would normally putting together a PowerPoint slide. But as I said before, and make sure that it's the colors that you want. But as I said before, you are going to want to, instead of exporting the slide, again, just select everything. So in this case, Command A is selecting all of these shapes. And then I'm going to right click, save as picture. So now we are going to call this sidebar. You could call this agenda. You can call it whatever you like. So let's save that. So now if I pop back over here, let's get rid of the old title. And now I'm going to drag in this sidebar and then I just make it the shape. Now you'll see it did add a little bit of a space on the side. Not ideal. Depending on which software you're using, you can change it. And then also I could always change my camera. I can either move a little bit over to the side or I can actually adjust my camera so that I'm a little bit over to the side. But this is a really quick example of how you can add an agenda overlay. Now doesn't have the transparency right now, but you can play around with those things and see how you like it. But let's say that you want to maybe animate this. So animations is a drawback to using PowerPoint because unlike Keynote, which allows you to export an animation with a transparent background, Keynote does not currently have that access. So what you are going to want to do if you are using PowerPoint is get a little bit creative with your streaming software. So I'm going to show you an example. So let's head back over to PowerPoint and let's start animating this. So I will first select agenda. This is the first thing I would want to animate. So just like if you're creating a slide, you are going to choose whichever animation. So maybe I want this to fly in, and let's open the animation pane, which you can get to over here. I actually don't want it to come from the bottom. I would like it to come, say, from the top, or maybe you want it to come from the side, and then you can see it come in. Then maybe I want these one by one. So if you are familiar with PowerPoint, you know that you can select the thing you want to appear and then just pick your animation. Just for the sake, I'm going to pick dissolve. Then, and as you build it, you will see the numbers will show up beside each one. So agenda is 1, introductions is 2, new initiatives is 3, the budget update will be 4, and new business will be 5. And if you are maybe talking really briefly to each point as you are starting off, say, your meeting or a presentation, and you want to walk people through what to expect, you might want to put a little bit of a delay. So perhaps after agenda shows up and introductions does, maybe you want new initiatives to be timed a little bit differently. So you can actually delay it by, let's say, 2 seconds. And then maybe budget update, 2 seconds. There's not a lot of time. You can always adjust the time and practice with what you'd like, but you can do this all in here. And so now you have your animations. You can click on the first one and say play from, and that way you can actually see what it's going to look like when you export this. And you will be exporting this as a movie, but it does not have a transparent background like you can do in Keynote. However, you can add yourself as a camera overlay in this white space here. So in this side, this is where you can actually add yourself. And you can use a pre-existing form, like choosing a square shape, or maybe a 4:3 ratio, or you can choose a custom size. And I'm actually going to show you how to set this up. I'll show you an example both in Ecamm and in OBS. But something else you can do, because you're going to add yourself on top, is you could add an element that really makes it seem more intentional. So for example, you could add a shape. So maybe I want to add a box, and I'm just going to draw a box that takes up a nice amount of space. And now I'm going to open the format pane. I actually don't want this to be filled. I would like it to be a line. And for that line, I'd like it to be actually pretty thick, because what we're doing in this example is making a border that will go around you. And you can customize this color. Maybe you actually want it to be a gradient, so you can add a little bit of the different hues. Maybe you want this to be a darker blue, and then you have a lighter blue, and you can play around with these different presets. You can also change the type of gradient. Maybe you want radial, where it comes out from the center, but let's just stick with linear. You can change the different paths, how you want it to appear. Play around with that if you'd like. But this just gives you a visual element that makes it look a little bit more intentional, and you are going to place yourself in this little frame or window. You can also do different styles, like if you want to add an element where there's an extra border, you can do whatever you want. I would just play around with it and see what you like. For this purpose, I am just going to stick with a solid line. So now we have our animation. You've set out the timing that you want. Everything's going to show up in the order that you want. And you have put your border that is going to house your camera. You are going to export this. Instead of just saving it, you're actually exporting it as a file. And the file format, it'll default to PDF, but you actually want to change it to a movie. Now you can pick MP4 or MOV. Let's pick MP4 as an example. And I just leave this presentation quality as it is. And then I export this. So now we have this export. So let's set up a new scene. So now I am in a new scene, and I am going to turn on demo mode so you can actually see how I add this animation to my Ecamm. So let's switch on a live demo mode. Now you can see my screen. This is the workspace, and I have my file open down here. Let's add this animation to my scene. So I drag it over, and you can actually see the animation shows up and it starts playing. And then there's this little picture-in-picture window. Before we deal with the camera, I want to show you these options. So when the video plays, you have some options, whether you just do nothing, where it just sits there after it's done playing, which is what I'm going to choose in this case. But you can also have it go to another scene, or it could end the broadcast. You don't want that. What you are probably going to do is either have it do nothing or go to the next scene if after that animation plays, you'd like it to just automatically go to another one. Now, for this case, I've chosen do nothing. Here you'll see the picture-in-picture, and when I drag it, it's not the same shape that I want. And while there are options for classic or square, and I could try those out, they're not really the shape I want. So I'm actually going to add a camera overlay. So down in overlays, I add a camera. So I'm going to delete the old picture-in-picture, and now I change this camera overlay to custom. And then I'll drag that up to the corner and just drag it to the exact shape that I want. So that's the really great thing about the custom overlay. So now if we were to toggle from my main camera, which is just me, over to this agenda slide, you can see myself in this little box and the animation. You do have another option though. You don't have to be in the box. So the other thing you can do is actually drag yourself. Maybe we want to go over here and drag this down to the bottom, and we want it to be able to go out to the side. So now I have adjusted my camera using that custom camera overlay in Ecamm, and I have it beside the agenda. if I were to switch back to my regular camera, and then as soon as I go on this scene, then it will start playing. And in this case, it looks like an overlay, but in actual fact, my camera is the overlay, just covering the white space. So you do have options when you are exporting an animation from PowerPoint. You just need to get creative. So now we have OBS open and it has my camera coming in, and there is going to be a slight delay, so forgive that. But what I'm going to do is actually create a new scene, and I actually just want to duplicate my main camera since it's already at the zoomed in the way that I like. So I like to start that way. But this one we are going to call animated agenda and say, okay. And we are going to add this element. So under sources, you already have your camera feed. So now let's add another source. And this is going to be a media source because remember, you created a movie file when you exported from PowerPoint. So now we are creating a new one, and maybe we want to call this agenda, and then let's just give it a date, January 18, because you don't want to name it the same thing as something else. OBS does not like you to use the same name more than once, but we're going to create this new one. So now we have this opportunity to open the file. So I'm going to browse. Here I see we've got my movie in my PowerPoint folder, and I'm going to say open. This is where you have some decisions to make. For example, do you want it to loop? Well, no, in this case, you do not want it to loop. Do you want it to restart when it becomes active? Now, this is one where if you're just talking on your main camera, when you go to this slide, you want the animation to kick in. So yes. And this one says show nothing when playback ends. I want you to uncheck that because we don't want it to disappear. We just want it to stop. And then speed, we want to keep that exactly as it is because we've already set it to the speed that we want. So let's say okay. So now you see the slide, it is fitting the screen, the animation is happening the way that you set it up. However, I'm hidden. And that's because right now the agenda is over top under sources. So you want to add your camera up top. Now I'm taking over. So now you want to adjust the camera. And so we are going to do a little bit of, nope, that's wrong. We are going to go to the camera. Now I have my camera. Now I just messed up here. Let's put this back. And let's actually, so if we go to camera, one of the issues going on right now is that my camera is so zoomed in that I'm huge. So we are going to crop. So we want to go to the side. We want to press Option or Alt on a PC, and we're going to crop this picture. But then we need to drag it over to the other side until I see the side. We are going to then also say Option and then pull it in. And so this is what we're going to do on all edges until we crop that down to where we want it. And you can actually then start to shrink it. So maybe I want it to be here, Option down to the side. Want to pull it in here, pull it in here, and then once more we want to drag it, crop that, and then we can just fix it up. Now that all of them are on the screen, we can do that. And now if we click off to the side, you can see I'm kind of in there. I would spend a little bit more time making this look nicer, but you get the general idea. I've put myself in the frame, and now when this slide shows up. So if we switch to main camera, you just see me. And then when we switch to the animated agenda, you can see my picture in the middle with the agenda coming up. Now, you might also be thinking we can do the same thing as before, and that is correct. You can grab the camera and then maybe stretch it out to take up the rest of the slide and do it that way. nope, I just grabbed onto the wrong one. Fun with OBS. I don't use OBS as often, so it is not my forte. Also, this is very zoomed in, so I'd probably adjust my camera a little bit, but you get the idea. If I were to switch from main camera and then switch over to my animated overlay, now you can see the overlay, you can see me beside it, and it's all working as it should. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what you can do in PowerPoint. I encourage you to get creative when it comes to mixing it up with your overlays. Don't let the fact that you can't export with a transparent animation stop you from getting creative with these tools, because you can do some pretty impressive stuff using this tool. So as always, if you found this helpful, I really encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel, where I'll continue to put out content on how you can make more professional and engaging presentations.